To discuss it all and what we just saw, we have an esteemed CBSN panel joining us, starting with CBSN political contributor, Democratic strategist, and founding partner of 270 Strategies, Linda Tran. Linda was also the communications director for Tim Kaine during his time as governor. Lucky us. Next to her, Democratic strategist Liz Smith, and last and perhaps least, CBS News senior political editor Steve Chigueras. Steve, what to make then of this scene that we just saw? You might argue it's a coming attraction of what we could see as day one of this convention is gavelled in again by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is then set to deliver remarks. We heard her try to do that today, and as she plowed through the remarks she had prepared this morning, Bernie Sanders supporters set upon her. We saw it. We heard it. What to make of it?
Well, I do want to contrast to what happened last week in Cleveland, where we were anticipating this kind of stuff happening there. And it didn't really rise to the level of the chairman of the party being booed by delegates and by supporters of the candidate who's not going to be the nominee of the party. This is going to shape up, I think, to be a very interesting week. Bernie Sanders supporters are not a happy bunch right now. So take already all of the year of this really hard-fought primary, put it together with the fact that Hillary Clinton chose Tim Kaine as her running mate, somebody who I think Bernie Sanders delegates feel was, it seems as if Hillary Clinton's not paying any mind to what Bernie Sanders accomplished in the primary, what progressives and liberals did to bring people into the party, and excited about voting in the primaries. And then on top of that, this email situation in which it looks like, potentially, that members of the DNC, or at least employees of the DNC, were rooting for Hillary Clinton and not Sanders, in their minds, rigging the primary. Add all that up, and you have 1,900 delegates that are not really happy with the scenario right now. And I think this is a prediction or a foreshadowing of what may happen this week. There's people talking about protests. They're talking about booing on the floor when Debbie Wasserman Schultz gavels in today. There's talks about all sorts of different protests here. This is going to be a fun week to cover for us journalists, because these things are normally very, very scripted. And I think that the Sanders delegates are going to do whatever they can to take it off script. Not great for the Democratic Party, who is trying to show unity and trying to get their nominees, Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine, at least get their message out there to the American people. Speaking
to that choreography, Liz, maybe one of the differences here is that even heading into day one a week ago in Cleveland, there was a floor fight, and it did get ugly, but it was believed that all parties could at least see it coming and could thus prepare reactions to it. Decidedly different, it seems, is this. How much now does the unknown loom as we stand now just hours away from the opening of the proceedings?
Okay, well, I think there are a couple things. First of all, people could see this coming. This is not a huge surprise. I remember I was a deputy campaign manager for Martin O'Malley on his presidential campaign, and I remember in the fall at the New Hampshire state convention, Debbie Wasserman Schultz getting booed down, not by Bernie Sanders supporters, but by Bernie Sanders supporters, Martin O'Malley supporters, Hillary Clinton supporters, because people were so disappointed that the people of New Hampshire were only going to have one debate. And she had similar, receptions in Iowa and other early states. So it's not that big of a surprise, I think, to people who are watching. And, as we've read in reports today, people like Hillary Clinton's chairman, John Podesta, we're trying to get her to step aside in the fall. But I think to the broader audience, it is a little bit of a surprise. But one thing I do want to correct on is I don't think it's just Bernie Sanders supporters that are booing her down. There are very few people who are stepping up to defend her. And, I think a lot of people are very disappointed with her conduct as chair.
I just want to point out that I think she could have mitigated some of this with her vice presidential choice, and I'm not, it's not a criticism of
Hillary Clinton could have mitigated
this. It's not a criticism of Tim Kaine. It's just that Tim Kaine, I think, plays to a different part of the Democratic Party than this group that's really upset. And I think the group of liberals and progressive Sanders supporters who are upset with the pick and with what's happened with these emails, they're looking at Hillary Clinton as somebody who is saying, okay, well, progressives, thanks a lot for being enthusiastic during the primary and backing Bernie Sanders, but we're going to go forward with somebody who's more of a moderate candidate. And I think that there's a little bit of...
Okay, but no vice presidential pick would have mitigated, the fallout from an email questioning Bernie Sanders.
Well, it also speaks to, but it speaks to as well.
That's the unexpected.
But it also speaks to the complicated calculus, really, of appeasement versus forward-thinking choice. We watched the ticket sit down with our Scott Pelley. There was a real ease there, notedly different from perhaps what we saw between, or didn't see, between Donald Trump and Mike Pence. She certainly has said, I wanted somebody with whom I am comfortable. I wanted somebody who's ready to be president today. And so at some point, look, they've already moved, Linda, they've moved Bernie Sanders back in this program tonight to give him a prime time speaking slot in the 10 o'clock Eastern hour when national networks will be taking it. He had previously been slated to be speaking in the 9 o'clock hour. We are seeing then Sanders and his campaign and perhaps his delegates appeased, but isn't there only so much that Hillary Clinton can do?
And it's not just about speaking slots and having the microphone at the Democratic National Convention. There's been a ton of progress, I think, over the last couple of months and weeks towards some of the issues that Bernie Sanders made very, very clear were his priority. So on college affordability, Hillary Clinton made that announcement many weeks ago now. On the actual process with superdelegates, we heard just a couple of days ago that's going to change dramatically over the next cycle. And these were core things for Bernie Sanders and his supporters. I mean, I do want to address what Steve said a little bit earlier, though. Understanding that there's certainly some discontent among some of the most diehard lefty progressives that Tim Kaine ended up being the vice presidential pick. The issues that we're dealing with today about Debbie Wasserman Schultz are about Debbie Wasserman Schultz 100%. There's nothing new about what we saw in these emails or the dialogue that's happening today and yesterday. She has had a troubled tenure basically since the moment she stepped into her shoes as the DNC chair. And we heard some of the conjecture and some stories about it as far back as a couple years ago. Yeah. Everything from her potentially soliciting the DNC to pay for her wardrobe and not having a great relationship with the Obama organization and the folks that she's supposed to be the strongest cheerleader for. And then at the end of the day, the prime job for the DNC chair is to be an amazing fundraiser. Not just an amazing fundraiser, actually, but the best fundraiser. And that hasn't always been the case. And so she's had a difficult time all along, and I really don't think that any vice presidential choice or really anything Hillary Clinton could have done at this point would have changed what we just witnessed.
We should actually note, by the way, rehearsals are underway, and it's very interesting that of all the songs they are rehearsing, it is "We Are the Champions" that was played at the GOP convention.
That Queen didn't want.
Queen let them know. Apparently,
they licensed it.
Apparently, they're able to play it here. I want to, Steve. Let's look ahead to Bernie Sanders and what we might hear from him tonight, because it seems that despite the list of speakers, Senator Cory Booker, the First Lady, Michelle Obama, Senator Elizabeth Warren, that they now will all be perhaps looked past to Bernie Sanders, who will speak after all of them tonight, again, in that 10 o'clock hour. It would seem, if nothing else, a lot is now riding on what he might say down there on the convention hall. I mean, this could be either perhaps everybody could find a way to get along for the next 3 days, or he could really fan the flames. What do you expect?
I think what we're getting telegraphed is that he's not going to fan the flames. Now, the question is how, what does he say to his supporters? These are the people who are really upset.
And will they listen? Well,
that's the other question. And this is the point I was trying to make. It's not that the vice presidential pick would have ended this Debbie Wasserman. It's not a connected thing. I think you just add them all up, though, and that's just another example, another reason why Bernie Sanders' supporters are upset with the entire process, right? So he has to speak to them, but at the same time, I think he's got to continue with his full-throated endorsement of Hillary Clinton, right? And I think what we're getting at least telegraphed is, at least from his campaign manager and others, is that he will continue to do that. He's going to talk about Democratic unity. The question is, do his supporters buy it? They seem to have a laundry list of issues that have made them upset, all the way down to the procedural and rules and the future of the party issues that he's not going to be able to really address, I think, definitively in his remarks tonight. But the question is what does he say specifically to the 1,900 people that are going to be in his audience that are not happy with how this process is all played out? And will that calm them down this week? Because if it doesn't, this is ripe for them causing trouble all week. You know, there's Tim Kaine's speech on Wednesday, which is there are already threats from these folks to cause trouble, maybe walk out of his speech on Wednesday night. That's not a good look for the Democratic Party. So what does he say to them? We're going to be watching very, very closely.
If we then got a sense earlier today of what we might see, at least at proceedings beginning tonight, Liz, is there something that Bernie Sanders can say that can rally his troops? And by that, I mean really call off the dogs.
Yes. Well, I don't think we're going to see a Ted Cruz moment tonight from Bernie Sanders. Right. And he has signaled very clearly that he is going to try to rally everyone behind Hillary Clinton and show how high the stakes are in this election. And I think it's really smart of them to put him in the primetime hour because he's someone who brought all the energy to this primary. And he's the only person who can really help deliver people. And so I expect him to give a full-throat endorsement. I expect him to also stay very clear of the DNC drama and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Look, he got the victory.
Is it possible that he can't? I mean, these sound like great ideas, but then the stagecraft will happen. The highly choreographed optics will play out. Is it possible that he can?
Yes, look, we saw him yesterday on the Sunday shows, and even then he was relatively muted, I thought, in talking about her. And I think now that she's stepping down, what more is there to say? And I think he's going to take the high road relative to her.
I generally agree. I do think, though, that he has an opportunity to pat himself on the back just a little bit, right? And we know that he has that tendency. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't have to say, bye, Debbie, right, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But he can say, this was never about me. We set out to change the system, and we did. We know from all of these developments that have happened recently that your voice is having an impact, and that just kind of builds his stature in the movement. That said, I don't think that fundamentally he can call everyone off who's upset. It's just not possible for anybody, no matter how dedicated they are to the person at the head of the movement that they've built. And we saw when he endorsed Hillary Clinton a few weeks ago how deeply, viscerally, openly angry some of his best supporters were, and so that's going to continue. But what Liz said earlier about the overwhelming support that we're starting to see from polling of Bernie supporters is going to continue.
I do wonder, though, just on that real quick, if he can tie his revolution that he talks about to going after Donald Trump. I think that's the pivot that he maybe try to make.
Well, and against the backdrop of a GOP nominee as social media provocateur, we are seeing it almost by the minute today, looking to drive a wedge, it would seem, as Donald Trump, not just between Sanders supporters and those for Hillary Clinton, but also he's really taking Bernie Sanders very personally behind the woodshed and really looking to do whatever it is he can. How does that, I mean, that's another ingredient here in the brew of controversy.
And I think it's a huge ingredient. I think there's two things that Bernie's going to be really upset about. One, that Trump is actually trying to poach Sanders supporters. I mean, we saw that during Trump's speech, and we mentioned Bernie Sanders twice in his speech. And secondly, these insults that he's been lobbing on Twitter at Bernie Sanders. Again, I think this is an opportunity for Sanders to really try to morph this revolution into not winning the Democratic nomination, because that's done, but really how can he turn this against Donald Trump? And I think you're going to hear a lot of that in his speech tonight.
Pity we've had so little to discuss thus far.
There's nothing happening around here.
Things have yet to begin. Esteemed panel, we do appreciate, of course, you're with us all week long.
Thank you.
Thanks.